What's up, listeners of the Player 4 podcast? You're in luck. This is the Player 4 podcast, and we're going to do The Last Jedi spoiler cast for you. So one of us is not here, but three of us are here, and we're going to do the intros now.
Hello, I'm Tristan, aka Shagrazir on the Rooster Teeth website.
I'm Malachi, aka Tsukihira.
And I'm that first guy you heard, Joseph, aka Jay Dunlap on the Rooster Teeth website.
And there's no Alex, as we said. So, we're here to talk about Star Wars, The Last Jedi?
The Last Jedi.
Jedi?
Jedi? The Last Jedi? No more boats around. You can't park here, sir.
It's like the opposite of Waterworld.
It's just dry world. There's just like a jetty and a puddle, and that's it.
So,
All right.
Can you introduce how we're going to start off the episode?
Yes, I was just about to get there. I wanted to finish up the Waterworld joke, though. Okay,
Right.
So what we talked about, we wanted to go through, we wanted each person to give three basic impressions, something that the film made them think about. Could be random anything, and then the other two people are going to bounce off of them and try and pick apart what they said for about the next minute or so. And then we go down the line until we've done that with everybody, and then we're going to break down into how we felt about the movie at large, going with overall viewing experience, visual experience, plots of the First Order versus the Resistance, plot talking about Rey, Kylo, Snoke, and Luke, overall flow of the story, continuity, and was it good? Answer the big question. Did you think it was good? So let's start off with three general thoughts that we were left with, feelings. Didn't have to be anything in particular or anything particularly deep. I'll go first. My first one is I thought that the storyline involving the balance of the Force, as opposed to just good versus evil, was a good idea or a good direction to go into. My second was that I really liked that they used the Muppet Yoda from Episode 5 rather than the CG that they used for the first three. And then my third statement was simply that I totally called the illusion BS that Luke was using in the final battle before it was given away, because I noticed he wasn't disturbing the salt.
I actually missed that.
So I agreed 100% with the whole balance of the Force being a good idea, because it always felt like something that would be Luke's thing, that he would always believe that there needed to be a balance, especially since he was able to sort of channel the dark side to defeat Darth Vader without giving in to the dark side. That's always been something that Star Wars fans have talked about concerning Luke. The Muppet Yoda, I agree, that was also kind of cool. It didn't stick out to me as like something I walked away going, hey, cool, Muppet Yoda. But it was a nice scene. It was nice for Luke to get closure, considering he never got a full training. And here he is, like, he's a Jedi Master for all intents and purposes, but he's still not quite as wise as the Jedi Masters before him. So Yoda coming in and being like, yo, this stuff doesn't matter. It's just books, was kind of cool. And then I did not call the illusion in the final battle. My brain went all over the place the entire time. Like, the red was gore, blood, and guts. Then after that, I was like, oh, well, he just used like a shield, some sort of force shield. I was completely clueless about that.
So for the first one, just the balance thing, I liked how they went into everything and how they went about it. I liked how it was executed with that too. I agree with that. And the Yoda appearing was kind of like, oh, okay, but with him being motivation for Luke or talking sense into Luke, I thought that was the master still teaching the student. It was really cool. And I totally didn't call the illusion right away, and I'm glad it went that way, because like him just dodging or doing some lame thing to block all those blasters, I was like, are they going to really make him that overpowered with that? And the illusion thing, I think, was a really cool thing they did.
One other thing I wanted to say about that whole sequence, because I don't think it's really going to fit into our overarching conversation. I liked the aspect of Kylo Ren's character that wasn't, I have to do this on my own. He's almost Batman. I have to do this on my own. I have to go fight Luke. No, he's like, smoke this guy.
Yeah.
Hate him, kill him.
Yeah.
And that kind of leads me into, I really ended up liking, I wasn't sure after the first scene how I was going to like it, and I ended up really liking the amount of snark that they put into the film. it made it feel grounded in our time, because that's just sort of how people in our generation and the generations younger than us are now. The snarkiness. So like everybody says, blast him, and they just unload on Luke, and the smoke is still clearing, and the general leans over to him and says, "Do you think you got him?"
And then Luke like brushes his shoulder.
Yeah. It's like, yeah, and it was at that moment that I was pretty sure that it was an illusion. I was still confused how he had managed to give people like Leia the dice from the Millennium Falcon. I hadn't fully put it together, but then he started the fight, and what I was noticing was every scene, that entire sequence, from when they started rolling in the Death Star laser through the sand skimmers, the salt skimmers, flying up to try and destroy it, through to when Kylo is stumbling over the salt to get over to Luke. Everything is focused on how they have this rolling surface of large grains of salt, and below is this crimson blood red planet. And there was so much focus in every one of these scenes on, look, we're doing a spray of salt to reveal the red underneath. Look, this person like picks some up and is like, oh, it's salt. You know, he like tasted his finger. Oh, look over here. You know, when they slide their boot to get into a fighting stance, we're showing how the salt waves away from them to reveal the blood red planet. And then Luke, I realized they were trying to trick you. They're thinking, well, he's in such perfect harmony with the Force that he doesn't disturb his surroundings. I'm like, no. He didn't have to block or dodge any of those bullets because he's not there. It's an illusion. That's why he's not disturbing the salt. Yeah. I got the payoff when they finally revealed when Kylo slices through him and catches nothing. Has no purchase on Luke's form. Like, knew it, called it, called it.
I knew something was up when, if you notice the fight with him, Luke never once hit lightsabers with him together or let him hit him.
Just dodged.
Yep, he dodged the whole time. But that was
the one exchange. They only had one exchange where he dodged, and then he immediately like did the whole "I'm Obi-Wan Kenobi sacrificing myself," and Kylo slices through him. I mean, there was 1 second.
No, it was a couple times, because the first initial slash where he charged in and slashed and went past him, and then it did the Matrix style slash again. So it was about 2 exchanges, maybe. Was there? No, I think it was just a 2.
I would say 2 at most.
Yeah, 2 at most.
Yeah, then he let Kylo Ren talk for a little bit, and then was like, no, none of those things are going to happen.
Yeah.
Anything else from you, Tristan?
I guess if you want me to talk about my point, now that you've gotten a chance to talk about it for just a moment, I would say I really, like, the reason I chose the points I did, especially, like, Yoda, why did I feel that was important? I felt like that was an homage to the original 4, 5, 6. Just like there were several moments in 1, 2, and 3 that were homages to 4, 5, and 6, but more so I compared it to 7, where 7, the whole film was an homage to Episode 4, in that it didn't deviate from the plot of Episode 4, like, at all. It was like, this is an homage to the original series because this worked, and we know people will enjoy this, but it was too much of a clone of the original. So it didn't stand on its own enough, in my opinion. But then this one went completely in a new direction, but then they brought in the puppet. And this served 2 purposes. One, it directly tied it to 4, 5, and 6 as this movie's homage to the original. And 2, it was a nod to the audience who so many people complained about CG Yoda flipping all over the place with lightsabers in episodes 1, 2, and 3.
Okay, I can see that. If I can have a few seconds to respond to one of those things you said, because we did a spoiler cast for The Force Awakens in our first year of the podcast, but not only did it never actually see the light of day, but I wasn't even there for that recording session, so you and I recorded something separate.
Yeah. Which also never saw the light of day.
Right. I never had an issue with the plot of The Force Awakens being really close to the plot of A New Hope. There were plenty of things that weren't the same thing, but it was the hero's journey, and it did end with the destruction of a Death Star. I felt like the entire point of that was for it to be a backdrop of developing characters, and I figured the payoff was going to be in this movie, and I feel like it was, but I'm going to talk more about the similarities in the way that they did the plots of these two most recent movies a little bit later on in the podcast. For now, though, I want to hear about Malachi and what he liked about the movie and didn't like.
Okay.
All right. For me, I think they had quite a few nice special or effects that were really good in the movie. Of course, CG is always getting better and better. One thing I liked was the dreadnought ship and those cannons. That was pretty cool. For look wise, and one of my favorite scenes in the movie, which really no one's done too much with, which is surprising. But when the Rebel flagship turned around and went into light speed right through the enemy fleet, and it looked gorgeous, and they did so well with the sound effects and everything. And then I liked a lot of the deeper stuff in the movie when Rey was on the island trying to convince Luke to come and help, and just the talk about the Force and what it is. I really enjoyed that, and how he mentioned Jedi just becoming arrogant with the way things were, and that's why things got out of hand. And I fully didn't get what happened when she was against the mirror wall. Like, I kind of have an idea what was going on there, but I still haven't. I need to think about it more. But that was a cool scene, and it has a deeper meaning, which I might be wrong about. But and one thing me and my dad were talking about that we found a little lackluster was some of the character attachments. Like, I agreed with some of the statements to where the character development is okay, but it could have been stronger. So you really don't have like some characters you have a bit more attachment to. Others are kind of just okay, yeah, that sucks. So those are the points that I found interesting, and also what I thought was so.
Okay, I do think that Lightspeed scene was visually stunning as well, and the Dreadnought was visually stunning, and that's actually part of the 3 sentences that I have prepared as well. The mirror scene, I'm not even sure if we're ever going to get any sort of closure on the mirror scene and the parents, or whether the point they're trying to make is a combination of J.J. Abrams doesn't know how to answer the questions that he asks in his movies. I saw a humorous video that was critiquing the entire movie by having 2 guys talk about what they want to put in the movie as if they were the executives, and one of them was, to be fair, I mean, have you ever seen Lost? J.J. Abrams doesn't know the answers to his own questions. But I think maybe they were also trying to make a point that she's more important than her lineage, that she can define who she is, which is why it was just Rey after Rey after Rey after Rey after Rey, all the way to the mirror wall. And then they're it's 2 people, and they converge and become 1 person, and boom, it's Rey.
Mm-hmm.
And his character attachment, I think this is a good time to say it before I give Tristan the mic here, which is I don't feel like many of the character dynamics changed at all. It's more like we explored them. The only dynamic that changed was Finn has a girlfriend, I guess, and Rey is jealous, not of the fact, it's not that Rey wants to be Finn's girlfriend, it's that she misses the closeness that they had because they spent the entire movie away. She finally gets back, he's woken up and he has a girlfriend, and now she just feels like she can't be connected with anyone because the guy that she spent all her time with this whole movie ended up in charge of the First Order. And otherwise, we just sort of let characters be themselves, and then we just sort of explored the Rey-Kylo dynamic without really changing anything. It hasn't really changed since the last movie, which was Kylo wants to train Rey, and now Rey wants to turn Kylo, and Kylo wants Rey to join him, and nothing really changed at all there as far as the character dynamics are concerned. Tristan, what about you?
I guess going in order of what Malachi said, I would say he already knows that the flagship using hyperspace as an attack was one of my favorite scenes. Not only because it's strangely, and I still can't figure this one out, still an idea that until this moment in all of the Star Wars universe that I've experienced has never been explored before. It does beg the question, unfortunately, why didn't they do it with the first 2 ships as they ran out of fuel, just turn them into torpedoes?
rather than just let them get blown up. But really, it's one of my favorite scenes because of how it was shot. Just the monochromatic filter, the complete and utter silence during the action. I thought that made it a very powerful scene, which is exactly what you want the first time something like that is done in a universe. So I thought it was handled very reverently and very well. Moving on from there, I don't know, you're saying, Malachi, you were saying you wanted deeper meanings?
No, I like some of the deeper stuff. Like mainly the biggest thing was with Luke's training with Rey. Just that discussion he had with her with each lesson. I really enjoyed those parts.
I think that was another one where they kind of nodded to the audience to say, look, we've got 40 years of Star Wars media, and still people are asking, what the hell is the Force anyway?
Yeah.
And so to finally have Luke stand there, like, face right up in Rey's face going, what is the Force? Define it. Was just refreshing. It felt like a very self-aware movie. And I feel like you can push things too far doing that, where a movie is too self-aware and then it doesn't take itself seriously enough. And I feel like they pushed the envelope just far enough. Like, I didn't feel... There were a lot of times throughout, like with the snarkiness, with some of the self-awareness, I thought they were getting a little too close to that limit of self-awareness to where it suddenly turns into a bad movie. But I felt like they never actually crossed the line, and that was pretty awesome. And it worked in their favor. And then to your final one, I felt like there was actually kind of a lot of character development. Personally, just looking specifically at Finn, how far he's come from wanting to serve the First Order and unite the universe as a stormtrooper to realizing, holy crap, we're committing atrocities. This isn't uniting people at all, and leaving to making a huge difference. Like, almost every maneuver against the First Order is driven by his knowledge of First Order technology, because he was just around it his whole life and had to know how it worked so that he could clean it. Well, so it's kind of simultaneously funny and awesome. Like, he only knows how this stuff works because he had to clean it. And he had to know how not to blow himself up with it while he was cleaning it.
Well, me and my dad did agree that Finn was the one that was a little better along than the others.
But I will disagree that Rey was poorly developed, because they're using Rey and Kylo, if you look at it the way I'm looking at it, which might not be the right way, it's all personal how you take it, to explore the balance of the Force thing. Rey is poorly developed in that her advances in being able to use the Force come in leaps and bounds with little, application. She just suddenly gets stronger. But I look at that as it's because Kylo's getting stronger. Because there's this balancing in the Force, because there's a powerful dark side user, there has to be a powerful light side user to keep everything in balance. As Kylo gets stronger, it actually forces Rey to become stronger, and she realizes new powers innately because the universe is maintaining a balance, and they are connected by the Force, which may in fact be helped along by the whole Snoke intentionally connecting them, but I'm not certain. But I do feel like you're looking at, a seesaw that's trying to remain level. So every time Kylo gets stronger because Snoke is training him, Rey gets stronger by virtue to keep things in balance. That's my opinion.
I'm not saying that there's not character development, but I'm saying that it's suffering from the same issue that Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2 and Matrix Volume 2 suffered from, which was you did most of your character development in the first movie, and then you just kept going in that same direction with the next one. So most of what you said about Finn was established in the first movie and just kept going. Most of what you said about Rey started in the first movie and just kept going in this one. And just like I said about Guardians Volume 2, none of the dynamics were really changed that much. They sort of kept all the relationships how they were. The only change being Rey wants to help Kylo, now she knows she can't. And Finn has a girlfriend. That's the only... And I guess the only other change that we saw was in Poe deciding that not every mission has to be a suicide mission.
That's another thing that I want to get into in the course of this discussion.
My first one is beautiful set pieces. Second one is the Rey Kylo subplot was really good. And the third one is missed opportunities.
Well, it's hard to disagree with beautiful set pieces. They chose very interesting worlds. They even made what was effectively a siege interesting to watch. So usually with a siege, you're looking at a castle or a city outside of which an encroaching enemy army has a raid such that no one can get into or out of the city. It's not so much even that any direct attacking or an attempt to destroy the city is going on. You're simply waiting until their resources run out. And so this was taking that idea and put it into space with moving ships, where the Alliance ships, the Rebel ships, were fast enough to stay out of range of the destructive weapons of the First Order, but the only thing they had resources to do was keep running. So they were effectively under siege. And so that was an interesting set piece there, that you basically had this moving space siege. The gambling planet. I like the gambling planet. I thought that was a really good set piece.
That, for me, falls under set pieces and missed opportunities, personally. But I'll get to that. I'm going to let you guys talk.
I think we have to circle back to missed opportunities to ask you to expound on that. So let me hit your second point really quick here, which was the Rey Kylo subplot, which we've been expounding on the whole time. The whole one trying to turn the other, one trying to train the other, and then the whole Force maintaining a balance between them. Again, agree that it is an interesting direction to go into, that diverges from just the, Luke is ultimate light and Vader is ultimate darkness, and then light turns darkness to light kind of thing. It's not as cut and dry. I don't think it's going to end up as cut and dry anyway. Malachi?
So beautiful set pieces, like the one scene that I described, and also just a lot of cool places. I forget how many worlds they traveled to.
Two?
It was only two.
Three?
Yeah.
I think it might have been three.
Yeah.
I think it was the world that the rebels started on and then left. The gambling world, and then the
Luke.
salt planet.
Well, there's also the planet Luke.
And Luke. So 4, and then 5 if you count space, which I do.
The planet space.
Planet space.
So yeah, some pretty cool stuff in it. I did like a lot of the new things that were in it. I'm trying not to be too specific, but yeah, I agree with it. Basically, I agree. The Ren and Kylo subplot. Yeah, I think how I should word it. The not giving up on him, I thought was a really cool thing. Like her really trying to make him better. And that struggle was a very interesting part of their relationship, and the communication between them, just them trying to understand, or both of them searching each other's feelings. Was an interesting point for me with that. And then missed opportunities, I want to say, with my skill, with my knowledge of the Star Wars universe, I don't have any good points to play out or to mention, just because I haven't watched the films in quite a while to say what they could have done better. And that's it for me.
I will expound a little bit here. As far as the set pieces, I felt like the plot served to bring you from set piece to set piece, and the set pieces were just visually amazing to look at. The ones that stick out to me are, let's see, so the plot of the story, we've got like the running away from them, so we've got the siege scene going on, as Tristan was referring to, and that was just a visual spectacle for us to look at, was this space siege. Then we've got Rey on the island, and I kind of felt like maybe they spent a little bit too much time with Luke being like, I'm not going to train you. I'm not going to train you. I'm not going to, because we know he's going to. And I think it took a little bit too long, but that's not the point we're making here. The island itself is a set piece, and there's little set pieces on the island as well. And then, of course, the inside of the Millennium Falcon serves as a set piece when Luke goes in there and everything lights up. Then we go to Kylo Ren, and every time he and Rey do their Skype calls, he's got like brooding dark rooms where he can stand, and it's sort of a set piece. And then we've got Finn and his girlfriend, and they go to the casino world, and that is definitely a set piece. But there's multiple set pieces in there too. There's the casino. There's where they're riding on the weird race horses things. There's the jail cell's not really a set piece, although they kind of do film the cell they're in very particularly as sort of an ambience when they're overlooking everything from the balcony. And then when they go down into the muckety muck and they see the little kids, those are all set pieces. And then we get back to the Resistance, and now they're trying to get away from the First Order. Sorry, not the Empire. Totally not the Empire. They've got the escape pods all lined up, and they're trying to get away. And then they get to the planet, and the set piece of there's the skimmers with the red sand, the red earth beneath the salt, and that's a set piece because they're showing us the contrast of color. And then we get to the standoff between Luke and Kylo, and that is one of the most visually striking set pieces out of the entire movie, because Luke is coming forward from the opening in the door, and you see the vastness of that ice mountain behind him. And then you look at Kylo, and you see the vastness of the planet, the open, wide planet with walkers behind him. In that entire fight, you can see that it's just all taking place on this vast white stage with a mountain on one side and walkers on the other. And there's all these little set pieces in other places, like the stormtroopers, for no reason, just sort of standing in a clump of a few thousand while one of them's going to execute Finn. And then the light speed happens, and then we change set pieces. And now everything's on fire. There's no stormtroopers, and now it's Finn facing off with Phasma. Then we've got the set piece of the Supreme Leader Snoke's throne room, and that's a set piece with the guys in the red around the walls and the overall mood, and him in his Hugh Hefner robe. And then and then he dies, and then the set piece changes, and now everything's chaotic, and we've got Rey and Kylo working together against the guard, and then the lightspeed thing happens, and now the set piece has changed to where they were fighting over the lightsaber, and now he sort of gets up shell-shocked, and she's gone, and everything's on fire. So I felt like overall the set pieces were a huge priority, to the point that the plot served to bring us from one set piece to the next, such as the lightspeed attack, amazing set piece in itself. Showing us it was almost like a painting, right? You see like the light spilling out of the ships, and everything's quiet because it's space and no one can hear you. It's light speed through a ship.
Yeah,
and immediately,
it was an interesting contrast. Like that scene alone, that's why I say it was so important to shoot it the way they did, because it was an interesting contrast to the whole universe. The whole universe of Star Wars, we've accepted since 1977 that sound does travel in a vacuum, because they have these big loud space battles with pew 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 lasers going everywhere and explosions, which we know in our galaxy, in reality doesn't happen. Everything's silent out there because sound doesn't travel in a vacuum. And just to digress just for a second here, it raised for me a few other questions about what exactly is their galaxy, what is space in their galaxy made of, that, everybody gets blasted out of the bridge on the rebel ship, including Princess Leia, out into space, and she's out there for at least several minutes while she's unconscious from the explosion, but she doesn't freeze, and she doesn't asphyxiate, and she's able to force pull herself back aboard and survive. So maybe sound travels in space there because it's not actually a vacuum, and being pulled out into space isn't necessarily lethal.
I think because you like science so much, you're overthinking this a little bit, because you're not wrong, except that I think the reason that there's laser sounds is because they want to pew-pew. And I think the reason Leia survived is because there was there's this like sub-strain of the story concerning the Skywalker family, which is they can call upon the Force much in the same way that Harry Potter learned that he had magic, which is when you need it. So she is out in space. She should be dead. She should be asphyxiated and frozen to death.
Yep.
But because she has this tie to the Force that she's used before, she
Yep.
used it to know where Luke was in Cloud City. She used it to know that Han was dead. She used it to sort of mentally connect with Kylo Ren right before he decided not to shoot. In this movie, I think that was when she was like, you know what, I really do need to sort of admit that I'm Force sensitive. And then she used that to not freeze to death and asphyxiate. And then it brought her to consciousness, and then she Mary Poppins her way onto the ship. I mean,
She's Mary
even though
Poppins
he's not a
now.
Skywalker, Han Solo did the same sort of thing.
Well,
Would-
and because of this point that you're about to make, I want to disagree with you just slightly. I agree with everything you say, but I want to disagree in that I think they are moving away from the Skywalkers are special, and they're really moving into people can be Force sensitive. A lot of people can be Force sensitive. Everybody maybe could be Force sensitive, and training or affinity or natural born in talent can allow you to manipulate that. And it's not that I want to say, my disagreement is I want to say, I don't think it's because Leia's a Skywalker. I think it's because we're getting to the point where we can accept that it's not midi-chlorians, but a lot of people can use the Force. They just have to figure it out.
I appreciate that they're moving away from midichlorians, but there's still this sort of substrain of, like, the trailers for The Force Awakens was Luke saying, my father had it, I have it, my sister has it. And so I feel like they're moving that direction, but definitely Leia was able to do that because she was a Skywalker. At least that's my assertion. But I also do see your point, because Han Solo totally in the last movie shot someone he wasn't looking at and then looked confused as to how he did that.
I loved all of Harrison Ford's scenes in that film, except the one that he died in.
Yeah, which we could also talk about, but that's a different movie. And I'm going to move on to the Rey Kylo subplot. I'm just going to say that it was hilarious when Luke came in and saw them touching hands. It's like, you kids! It's like a camp counselor trying to catch kids trying to bang in the tent.
Mating.
And then missed opportunities. Missed opportunities, when I talked about the plot serving to go from set piece to set piece, that's part of it, but it's not really the sum total of it. I think that the casino world was a missed opportunity because it didn't ultimately go anywhere. I felt like it could have gone somewhere, but it's like, Maz is like, yeah, go to the casino planet, and the guy with the thing on his, and they get there, and the guy with the thing on his doesn't even care about them, and the guy in their cell just so happens to be able to help them, then betrays them. Like, what was the point of this entire subplot?
Okay, so I do want to talk about that because, like I said, I like the casino planet, and I think that you're right. There should have been more done with it. It was a set piece, not only nominally but entirely. Like, its whole purpose was just to say, and this is probably not even, I'm not going to say that this was the best way to use it, but it is how they used it. It was a set piece just to say, look, there are people getting rich off of playing both sides. This goes back to the whole the banking clan on
You're talking about Kanja Club?
what?
The gang that showed up on Han Solo's ship?
I don't know. I'm talking about back during the Old Republic, or
Oh, so you're talking about
during
the
its
Hutts.
fall. No. There's a banking clan on a planet called Scipio, and they're like these lanky blue people, and they're obnoxious. Doesn't matter. The fact of the matter is that they're bankrolling everybody. Like the Old Republic was getting loans. The Rising Imperium, which was led by supposedly Dooku, was getting loans from there, and they were bankrolling the whole thing. And it was that whole it was a debt economy where they were basically getting rich off of fake money by keeping the war between the two sides going. And that's kind of what they were showing with this casino planet, is here's all these guys who have either bankrolled or designed or made or sold weapons to one or both sides and just gotten rich off it. And here, this is the life they live, completely away from the conflict that they are creating, that they are helping to perpetuate. And, it's not right, but it's happening.
The Intergalactic Banking Clan.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
there's a subsection of them, which is the Moonlist Banking Clan and the Traxxas Division.
Okay. That's the one that their homeworld was Scipio, which I think is Scipio.
I want to agree with you there that it's a great story to tell off to the side.
Yeah.
But when we get to the plot of the First Order versus Resistance part, I'm going to make some points about that, and I think I'm going to bring this up later on. But I think that it was a missed opportunity in that it could have been more significant to the plot.
Yeah.
Or
No,
it
I
could have been
agree.
an even better side plot. But as it stood, it stuck out like a sore thumb because it was so different from the rest of the movie, where the rest of the movie was taking us from place to place in the story of the First Order versus Resistance.
Mhm.
And then all of a sudden we're on this casino learning about the war, you know?
Right.
Malik,
We're seeing, so like what I actually like the contrast that it just to keep arguing with you. I like the contrast that it's set up because it's like First Order, Resistance, First Order, Resistance. Holy shit, these rich assholes who are just sitting around getting richer because these two other groups are fighting each other, and look how things are when you're not on a crappy planet that's getting blown up as you get away from it, or a crappy planet that was set up as a last holdout, the salt world, or in space on a ship that's slowly dying.
I think it would have been more at home as a plot element in a story that wasn't about a siege. I think if we had a story that was more the story's moving and they're warring in different places, and the resistance is continually trying to stay out of the reach of the First Order, like the movie started off with, I think it would have had more gravitas in the story to say, look, these guys are profiting off of it. As it was, we were past the point where that profiting mattered because the resistance was pretty much non-existent. And I felt ultimately the missed opportunity was for the story to focus around a siege when they obviously had more they wanted to tell, and they couldn't. You have anything else, Malachi?
Oh, with that whole thing, I think the biggest 2 points too was also the point where Finn trusted the beacon with the one pilot guy, I forgot his name. Poe.
Yeah.
Trusting the beacon with that, I think that was another reason for the leaving, was to show that he was, needing to wait to meet back with Rey, and also just to deepen the relationship with his girlfriend.
I'm not sure what I get that the character herself accomplished a lot. I don't know if you guys knew about this, but on a Facebook post by the Star Wars page, someone had said that character didn't serve any purpose, and then the Star Wars admin ripped him to shreds by talking about how important she was.
Yeah.
Ultimately, I think she could have been removed from the story, and the story wouldn't have been any difference.
That's how you feel?
That's how I feel.
Okay.
I liked the character. It was okay. I liked that they showed a connection between her and her sister, who was in the bombing run.
Yeah.
But I felt like maybe they tied too much of her character to her sister did this heroic thing. Therefore, you're going to attach that same emotion towards this character now.
I'm gonna argue with you
because
again.
she's alive. Okay, go ahead.
I agree. Plot-wise, action-wise, she was unfortunately unnecessary. Her purpose was her technical understanding of these things, which was good. Unfortunately, she never even got to use it because they got set up at the end anyway. The reason they needed her there was because she was the one who could shut it down so that the other guys could jump without being tracked. So she would have been plot important, and then her entire plot importance was removed. But she was extraordinarily important from a grounding and character development standpoint and a world development standpoint. Like this whole time, one of the big questions, one of the big lessons this movie sought to teach or to talk on, and it expounded on it repeatedly. It would not let you forget this lesson, and that is that failure is necessary. You cannot have success without failure. And the secondary message to that, which was even more powerful, was heroes are people who get others killed. People are heroes because they did something nobody thought was possible, and usually at great expense. And that is exactly what Poe did. And that's what he learned at the beginning, or should have learned at the beginning, didn't figure out till 3/4 of the way through the movie, was that he ran out there trying to be the hero and got all of their bombers destroyed. Yeah, he took out that behemoth, but they can't take out any more behemoths because they've got no more bombers. He got all of them destroyed.
Well,
Yeah.
she was also the anchor for the side story of going to the casino planet because she was the one that was mentioning, so like, I came from a mining place, and this is how the world is in this environment. This is why this place is ugly.
I can see that. I think she served more of a character function than a plot function.
Yes.
Although she did move the plot forwards towards the final subversion, that the thing she was going to do didn't happen. I can see that. But my criticism is more towards they could have used her more.
Yes. Well, I'm not going to disagree with that. Yes, they could have made her character, like I said, more plot action important. And it really just kind of sucked that they had basically one thing they wanted her to do, which was hack this computer. And then they didn't even get to do that because they got double-crossed right before she was about to become useful.
Well, there was also the end where she stopped Finn from killing himself, ramming into the siege cannon.
Which was more pounding that whole heroes aren't what we need right now.
It's saving the people you're fighting for what you love.
Was anyone else confused about how they managed to just sort of mosey on back into the hole in the door?
Yeah.
Where were they?
Well, granted, Luke was distracting them.
You keep harping on me for getting too much into the science of it, but I want to know how she stopped Finn from sacrificing himself, because everybody else broke off and he continued in a straight line at top speed.
Yeah.
And so supposedly she turned away, then turned 90 degrees and somehow matched his speed or matched his position, even though they should both have the same top speed, and then turned 90 degrees and stayed moving forward with him and climbed into him from the side.
Granted, you could say it was the resistance from the force of the siege cannon, because he was literally flying in part of the radiation of the cannon. That's why it melted his guns as he was flying forward. So that could have slowed him.
His ship being damaged, but there was nothing indicating that his ship was being slowed down.
But you could say that, though.
As with most movies, it's because she really, really wanted to.
Love triumphs.
The system is based on need, just like the Force. Just like being a Skywalker. She's the Skywalker of salt skimmers.
Right. Okay, so let's move on, since we're at the 40 or so minute mark, to our 7 points of critique. Let's start off with the overall viewing experience.
I enjoyed it.
Mm-hmm. I found it very enjoyable. I was confused when I was simultaneously confused by people saying this was the best Star Wars movie since, and this was the worst Star Wars movie since, because I felt like it was neither.
Yeah,
I felt like it was very, very enjoyable.
I agree.
I mean, I could easily put it on the level with other great ones, because I thought there were many parts of it that were done as well, if not better, and it was simply going in a different direction, which actually makes it easier to say this is a great one, because it didn't try to do the same thing as other ones, so it kind of gets its own pedestal to be put on. For me, it's probably in the top 3 or 2 even. I really liked it, and it only meant more to me that they went in a new direction. They said, you know what? The Skywalkers had their time in the limelight. This is about the Force. This isn't about the Skywalkers. This is about the Force. And I appreciated that. And that really seems to, like, for me, that's a good direction to go in. What confused me was just the people saying it was terrible. And that I look at that and it's just, you're just having trouble letting go of the Skywalkers.
It's weird because it's usually the same people who said this one was terrible that said that the previous one was terrible, but for opposite reasons. If The Force Awakens is too much like A New Hope, then there's no way you can criticize this one for not being exactly like Empire. It's just flipped.
And that's another homage that I forgot to mention, was that the whole setup on the Salt planet was like Hoth.
That's obvious, but
it was obvious, but I'm just saying that was yet another homage, saying here's 4 and here's 5, and what's going to be the homage in 6? Are they going to end up on a moon with little yub-yubs?
I feel like they combined in some ways 5 and 6 because the Emperor is out of the story. Like, what would have happened in Episode 5 if Darth Vader said, "Luke, join me," And Luke said no, and then Darth Vader became the Emperor. That's sort of what we're seeing now. Like, there's no redemption for Kylo Ren because he is now the bad guy, you know?
He's
But
not
I
the
did...
leader of the First Order, but, just like that wonderful argument I got to have on the RT site recently, every man is the hero of his own story.
Definitely.
He still believes that whatever he's doing is the right thing, and there's some reason he believes it's right.
Ultimate power corrupts... what is it? Absolute power corrupts absolutely.
Absolutely, yeah.
So because he's in charge of the First Order, he's convinced he can use it for good.
Right.
But it's still the First Order.
And you're right. Like I said, bad guys are still the hero of their own story. There's something in their mind, no matter how deluded it might be, that is convincing them that what they're doing is right. I think that ultimately, and I was discussing this with Malachi earlier, I think I don't know, but I'm kind of hoping, honestly, that they're going to use this whole balance of the Force angle that they're exploring right now, and the fact that now Kylo is the leader of the First Order. He is Supreme Leader Kylo Snoke Ren, and
the
second Junior Esquire. And you've got Rey, who now has to assume Luke's responsibilities toward the Jedi, in A, because he's dead, and B, because she stole the books, the little klepto. Which I just thought was hilariously funny, that they had this big, powerful, emotional scene with Yoda and Luke as Yoda burns the first Jedi temple and supposedly all the knowledge contained within, and then mocks how boring it was to read the books.
Page turners, they were not.
They were not. Exactly. And Luke's like, man, I can't believe we just destroyed all that knowledge. And they have this big emotional scene about letting go. And then one of the last things you see is Finn gets on the Falcon, opens a drawer, and there are the goddamn books.
Well, he also said, you read them all, you have? And Luke's like, no.
Page turners, they were not. Anyway, not the point. But now I've lost my point. Hang on, getting it back. Right, so you've got Kylo and Rey as the leaders of their respective sides, but there's also this really strong connection between them as they tried to turn one another, as Snoke made them kind of understand each other. I'm really hoping that they explore something the expanded universe started to explore, which was the idea of the Grey Jedi, or in this case, Force users without these religious titles. People who aren't absolute good or absolute evil or just deluded. People who are just Force using and trying to maintain the balance of the universe.
I like what you're saying. Unfortunately, I don't think that's where they're going, because the title of the movie is The Last Jedi, and because Luke said, I'm not the Last Jedi.
Wait, I don't think that how the title The Last Jedi, because this wouldn't be the Great Jedi. This would just be, like, what I liked in this was that they kind of said, look, Jedi, Sith, they're just words the religion created. If we get rid of the religion, there are no more Jedi, there are no more Sith, there are just Force users. And these Force users are either helping people or helping themselves.
I think that the intent, and I could be wrong, I could be proven wrong in a few years, I think the intent is for the word Jedi to still be used. I think they still intend for Rey to call herself a Jedi, because there was this subplot that we could have seen more of. We could have seen more of Luke's journey here, and I think that they wanted it to take a backseat because of Rey and sort of let it take center stage right at the end where he comes to peace with everything, because he sort of made amends and saved everyone. But he was saying, it's time for the Jedi to die. The Jedi are a failure. They always fail. They're hypocrites. Every time they're in charge, they lose. And he's like, there's not going to be more Jedi. And then right at the end, he says, no, I'm not the last Jedi. So then it shows Rey as she's like lifting the rock. So I think the intent is, yes, balance in the Force is important, but the paradigm of the Jedi might just change what they're about. That's my thought.
I can hope. I'm not disagreeing with you, but I can hope.
What about you, Malachi? Anything on overall viewing experience?
No, I think we covered it pretty good. I don't want to elaborate too much. We could talk. We could talk for hours.
Right. So next is visual experience, and we've talked about this. Is there anything more we want to say about that, or would we just agree that it was just brilliant to look at and just tons of set pieces.
Our points that we put before described it pretty well.
I thought so.
I just want to reiterate that yes, it was visually stunning, but I really wanted to talk about that attention to detail.
There was a lot.
There was a lot of attention to detail, little things moving that you could catch and understand, and it was all built into the plot, and it was nice.
So I guess now we get to the plot of the First Order versus Resistance, which we've already touched on a little bit. We talked about how there was a siege, but it was a space siege. I talked about that really there were set pieces just where the plot would take us from one to the next, but I have a gripe about the First Order versus Resistance plot, because just in the same way that the plot of A New Hope was the backdrop for the plot of The Force Awakens, disappointingly, the backdrop for this movie was the First Order's chasing the Resistance. Yep. First, we're here, and we destroy Dreadnought, and we lose our bombers. And actually, side note, it was funny because Gina and I talked about the bombers, and like out of the blue one day she goes, "Why were the bombers so close to each other?" And she was still angry about it.
I mean, why were the bombers so close to each other? How do bombs fall in space?
That's electromagnetic. That was electromagnetic, apparently.
How did the Chinese woman fall?
Yeah, so... how does this little bomber have artificial gravity? That's a lot of trouble.
Where was
how is the bottom of the ship open such that the bombs can all fall out, and she's like sitting above this big hole in her ship, looking? She can reach down and touch the Dreadnought without having all of her air pulled out and die.
Yep,
it's whatever.
The bombers were a big problem for science in this movie.
Yeah, so
you were talking about set pieces again.
Basically, the story of the First Order versus Resistance was one of the points I was going to make, but I ran out of sentences earlier.
Oh.
It loops around itself continuously and doesn't go anywhere. We're here, and there's a Dreadnought, we blew up the Dreadnought. Then we go through Lightspeed. They're here again, so we get away from them. All right, well, we're running out of gas, so we're going to get on pods. Now they're shooting at the pods. Now we're on the planet. Now they're shooting at our door. Now we're flying towards them. Now they're shooting at our ships. And essentially, every single set piece whittled down the Resistance with red shirts until finally the only people left were the people important to the plot, and they were all left. They were all put on the Millennium Falcon.
And the Crystal Critters.
And the Crystal Critters and the Porgs.
Those things.
Which I liked the Porgs. It was not as annoying as that last Indiana Jones movie with the little hamsters, or what was it, gophers or whatever.
Didn't see it, and for good reason.
Yeah, I liked the Porgs, but my gripe with the First Order versus Resistance story was it was too much of a backdrop.
It's too much of a backdrop. Part of the reason it's too much of a backdrop is because we haven't established what is the threat level of the First Order. What are they trying to do? Because here's my problem. Episode 7 comes along. Supposedly, there's government from Coruscant, just like the Old Republic. Everybody's happy, or supposedly happy, whatever. It's good enough, because you have this strong central government from Coruscant governing all the worlds, I guess. They didn't really talk about it. And then they all blew up. Coruscant blew up. All the other planets blew up. Holy crap. Starkiller Base. It just destroyed the entire central government. Now we have no government. And then you never feel the effect of that ever again, because all the planets are still functioning just fine without Coruscant and the central government. And then you never ever see the First Order establish itself as a government. They're just, as far as we know, they're like 6 ships flying around, blowing up people who call themselves rebels.
Even on the casino world, I don't think that would have looked any different, because they're just profiteers. There's not even any sort of First Order presence there. Not really.
First Order
that's the problem, is that the First Order was never established as, we're now the new government because we blew up your old one. Here are all the new laws. That never happened. So as far as we know, they've got this one big ship that Kylo Ren and Snoke sit on and go, what should we take over next?
I feel like there's a lot of places that are like, the First Order's not a problem. You know, like how you don't think something's a problem if you don't see it.
Yeah.
And they're just going around blowing up Resistance, but to what end? Like, it's not like they have any sort of stake in the galaxy, because they haven't taken anything over.
No, and you know what? Really, it's terrible now that I'm thinking about it because I never really put a lot of thought into it until just now. It's really the movie drives home this point. What you just said. People don't think of the First Order as a problem because they don't feel the effects of the First Order. When Leah put out the call and said, "We're going to call in backup. People are going to line up to stop the First Order and reestablish central government," and she
Mhm.
gets no responses. No
I
one
was like,
cares.
what are they going to do? Like, their entire plan is we're going to get chased like dogs into this little hole in the ground, and then we're going to send out a distress call, and what? Like, are people going to come out of the woodworks and immediately come out of Lightspeed and blow up Kylo Ren's ship? Like, what is the plan here?
To be fair to their original plan, they thought that they would get into that hole and have all the time in the world to wait for backup because the First Order would keep chasing their flagship right past the planet and not notice them going to the planet. That was their original plan, was to
It
go
wasn't a
there
very good
completely.
one.
Huh?
I don't think it was a good one, but you're right.
It-
That was their plan.
It wasn't a great one. It was a good one. It was a good plan. It wasn't a great plan. And the only reason it didn't work is because the only reason it didn't work is because of Poe.
It didn't work
Deciding-
because okay, you're right, but also he was working off the information he had,
I know.
and with the information he had, I don't think he was 100% wrong, and I
No.
don't think movies do this all the time, but there was no reason for the lady in charge to keep this from everyone.
No,
What were they
I
going
know,
to
I
do?
agree.
Were they going to
Wow.
kill someone?
She had no reason not to say, "Here's the plan. We're going to run until we get to this planet, and then we're going to jettison everyone off in the shuttles to this planet, and I'm going to keep going."
Well,
The worst thing that people would say is, "No, you're important. We love you. We don't want you to sacrifice yourself." And she would say, "This is the cost of war."
it's also in the sense of another reason why they got caught was because of the thief guy giving.
Well, that's what no, but that's what I was saying. That's why I'm saying it's Poe's fault.
Yeah.
Because Poe is the one who said, "You guys found a way for us to jump to Lightspeed without them tracking us. Okay, go get the guy who can help us do this." And they went and got a guy, and he betrayed them. And he was the one who came in and said, "Oh, by the way, First Order guys, they're all jumping ship. Look, you can see it if you zoom in.
If you look out a
zoom in
window.
enhance, just zoom in enhance, you can
Right,
see
right.
their ships leaving the big ship to go to that planet. So forget about the big ship, shoot those things." And the First Order sat there and said, "Well, we do see that. That could be a decoy, though." And then they went, "No, we had to zoom and enhance in order to see those. They
Right,
planned
right.
on us not zooming and enhancing. He's right. Shoot the little ships."
Why didn't they just, like, put their ship in the way so
That's
they
what
would
I
never
never
be able to see him out the window?
There are two things I never understood about that scene. Why didn't she just maneuver the flagship to intercept the shots that were hitting her little ships? A, and B, why did the laser bombardment curve?
That's what I was going to mention too. It looked like the shots were
They were
curving.
lobbing them. They went in an arc. They went up and then came down, but there's no up and down in space.
Maybe their space has gravity.
Their space has gravity, air. What else does their space have that ours doesn't have? Oh, heat. It's gravity, air, and heat.
Yeah. Okay. So the plot of Rey, Kylo, Snoke, Luke, we've talked about a lot, but I wanted to express some disappointment, and then I'll let you guys talk because I like to talk. Apparently, I don't like that Snoke was connecting Rey and Kylo because it sort of subverted the undertone that we had for the first half of the movie of the Force doing it.
Yeah, I didn't like
Yeah.
that either. And for the same reason.
Anyway, yeah. So what do you guys think about the overall Rey, Kylo, Snoke, Luke story?
I like the Rey Kylo balancing thing, and I liked my apparently pipe dream that it was the Force connecting them to show how when one gained power, the other one was given power, to maintain balance. And I liked this whole Luke redemption story that everyone else, not everyone else, but a lot of the people who hated the film have taken so much issue with, that Luke isn't this perfect paragon of Jedi light, that he can fail, that he can make mistakes, that he can lose faith in himself. I really enjoyed this whole, he made a mistake, he lost faith in himself, he did what every Jedi before him did, which was, I fucked up, I need to go and seclude myself until I can regain my balance with the Force. I liked that, which a lot of people that I was reading the entries of on the internet were that was what they hated about Luke, was that he was fallible. I liked that he was fallible.
Yeah.
Snoke was just such a nebulous bad guy to me. Like, he was hideous. He was angry. I didn't know what his goal was beside make Ben Solo evil, and maybe take something over, or I didn't know if he wanted to take over the galaxy or just blow it up. But I didn't think he was a terribly good bad guy.
Or wanted all Jedi dead.
I don't know whether Snoke was just sort of like this mythical character that J.J. Abrams came up with, and he was a hologram, and he was huge, and he had this big ugly face, and then the people that were after that had to come up with who is this guy and just gave up. I can't tell. He's the most fabulous guy in the galaxy.
He reminds me of the architects or the engineers, whatever you want to call them, from the Alien series, which I believe J.J. Abrams came up with.
Okay, I was
which
thinking
were
about
those
the
big
Matrix.
white-skinned humanoids that we don't know what their goal was other than to contain the xenomorphs by taking all of the xenomorphs and putting them somewhere where nobody else was.
Isn't that also the plot of Halo?
Yeah, kinda. Yes, kinda it is.
I felt like he was a missed opportunity to actually have a three-dimensional character instead of just being, yet again, a backdrop to Kylo and Ren's... I just said Kylo and Rey's story.
Yeah.
Luke, my issue with Luke's story isn't that he's fallible, because I thought that was amazing. That was great.
Right.
My issue was we saw too much of his daily routine, and I'm going to compare it to
Like
another
milking
Jedi.
those nasty creatures.
Yes. I'm going to compare it to the other two.
I could live the rest of my life without having seen that and been happy.
I was neutral about that. I saw a comic someone drew where Kylo Ren had his shirt off with the pants really high, and he had big nipples, and then Luke milked him.
Oh, God, no. I could have gone the rest of my life without knowing that.
Okay, this is a question for both of you. Do you think you have an idea of what kind of life Obi-Wan lived in the desert of Tatooine?
I think he sat in his house and wondered when Luke was going to be old enough to not be obnoxious.
I guess we know about as much as we needed to, which is he was just sort of watching over Luke.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that was...
So same question about Yoda. Do you think you have an idea of what his life was like on the swamp planet, Dagobah?
He sat around in the swamp.
As much as we needed to know.
Contemplated the Force.
Yeah, I think it was just them elaborating on his hermitness.
Like,
but
with
you're
Yoda,
right. We didn't see their daily routines. You're right.
Well, I would say that Yoda's was sort of implied. He roamed the swamp. He got attuned with the Force. He had a little hut. There was detail in the hut. You can see that he cooked himself food. He was going crazy. And then Luke sort of had that Yoda vibe where he was going a little crazy. He was trying to attune with the Force. But then they spent a good half hour on and off showing us his daily routine. But it didn't add anything to the story to do that. We would have gotten the point, I think, if they had abbreviated it.
I agree. I agree that we got more of that than we needed by, like, a lot. I think they were trying to expound on just how, I think they just didn't want to have people leaving the theater going, well, how did Luke survive on that stupid island for so long? You know, there's nothing there. You know, so they wanted that question just not to be asked. You saw him fishing, you saw him milking, you saw him wearing clothing that protected him from the weather, yada yada. But I feel like that it served only to, one, prevent that question from being asked, and two, show that it was just a boring freaking island that he was living on, and he did boring freaking island things on it. Now, this does lead me to another digression, because that's all I do is digress. How is he supposed to be on the most unfindable place in the galaxy if he's apparently on a planet that has literally only one place you can inhabit? As far as we could tell, this planet was one giant ocean with a single island on it, and no other land to go to. I mean, if you figure out, like, if you can figure out where approximately in the galaxy he is, you go to this planet and you find him because there's nowhere else he can be. Like, if you actually want to hide, you go to a planet where there's tons of places and people to hide amongst.
I'm confused about how long he's been gone, because in the previous movie, 3PO's like, oh great, that little map segment fits perfectly with this huge map segment. And it's like, wait. So the fragment's there, and all you need is where on that tiny map fragment Luke is. Couldn't you have just sent
Gone
someone
there, checked it out, been like, so I went to this unmapped sector, and there's like 3 planets here, and one of them's a big ocean with a single island.
Well, why don't you check out that island real quick?
All
Yeah,
right,
I did
hang on.
that. Luke's
Bunch
there
of
and there's
annoying
aliens.
porgs and this old guy with a beard.
And brontosaurus cows and indigenous peoples who maintain buildings, which is weird
Like
that we
5
didn't see them at all until not even like last movie, not even the beginning of this movie, but
No,
like I don't know,
think
maybe
they
an hour and
they just blended in, Joseph. They're like they're really earthy in color. They just blended
oh, they're
in.
camouflaged.
Yeah. It was
Oh, okay.
camouflage. So if you fly over the only island on this planet, you look down and it's like, yeah, it's an island. There's nothing on it except for those little huts.
I think we've covered the next point, overall flow of the story, which is like overall we liked the elements, but
Yeah.
my opinion is that the elements just sort of didn't fit well. For example, how the sunset pieces didn't quite fit each other. Like we've got thousands of stormtroopers, and then one of them is about to like hit Finn on the head with a vibro sword, and then next minute, and then there's no stormtroopers and things on fire. Finn and his girlfriend are still standing there, and Phasma's not next to them anymore, and then she's walking up to them. I felt like there wasn't a flow, although I liked the elements they were using.
Right. So that's a continuity issue where things don't remain in the same position from cutaway to cutaway. Or it got rewritten at the last second that they went. Yeah, exactly. But
I wonder.
basically something else happened.
Malachi made a really good point. I wonder if they knew what some of the set pieces, what the major set pieces were going to be, and they focused a lot of their manpower in the early days of working on this pre-production, of getting those set pieces worked out. Like the huge one of the walkers behind Kylo Ren and the mountain behind Luke and the vastness of everything being one of those, or maybe the light speed attack being one of them, and maybe like as they're piecing it together, decisions were made even in post, perhaps, about how to fit them together. Is that what you were saying, Malachi?
Yeah, that's about what I was getting at.
I was just about to mention with the whole walkers thing, because I know that you're pointing at that because of Finn and his girlfriend getting through the door. I think at that moment they were just to head back to that moment for a second here. I think they were just being ignored because everybody in the walkers was focusing on Kylo, and Kylo's entire attention was devoted to Luke. And so they just sort of walked in.
I wasn't so much referring to that. I was just referring to the visual of the walkers. You can sort of see based off of like the what is it? The filter you apply to something, it shows how far away it is. It shows distance.
Yeah.
So you can kind of see how far away and how big the walkers are compared to Luke and Kylo, and you can see how far away and how big the mountain is. And you can see the vastness of the sky. You can see a vast terrain with no landmarks. And then you see these two guys. And I thought that was very visually striking, but I felt like maybe that was something that one of those first ideas that they had when they wanted to have things that looked cool was maybe have artists like work out, like what they did with Lord of the Rings, like have artists draw out things.
I mean, that's fair because that is how they do it. They storyboard it, and during the storyboarding, they're going to have somebody sketch out, this is how I want this shot to look. So we need to set it up so that the shot looks like this. But that's when you have continuity people who are supposed to come in and say, okay, in order to get this shot to work with everything, all the rest of the story we're telling, we need this and this and this to happen first. And so either it got cutting room floored, or they didn't have enough people focusing on continuity for it to flow properly.
I think we've addressed continuity as well, which is the next point. Even with the other films, we had some minor gripes with the continuity with the other films, but I do like, as Tristan said, how they're sort of, they're not even retconning the Force. They're changing the way that the characters are viewing the Force, because the Force is like, yo, I've been in this whole time. I'm not bound by religious terms, and I'm just concerned with things being balanced. So, as just Tristan pointed out, Kylo gets stronger, Rey gets stronger, and I think that's not out of continuity with the other films. I think it seems like an inevitability of the Force because he's like, "Stop fighting over me."
And it was a good way to do it, like to be able to change our interpretation of the Force without retconning stuff, because you can easily take this interpretation and lay it over the previous films and go, this definition still works, with the exception of midichlorians. Because the way they managed it was just to acknowledge Jedi and Sith is just a religion, which means this is a way that people look at the universe. It's an explanation, but it's not the definition.
I think that midichlorians are just an aptitude measurement, but I would rather they just not bring it up anymore.
Well, they haven't. They didn't mention it in 7 or 8. I think they are trying to make them not be a thing.
It would be cooler if it was more of an aptitude rather than, even Master Yoda doesn't have a midichlorian account this high. This guy's really talented. No, it's just an aptitude. There's an aptitude in everything. But as you said, anyone could be Force sensitive if trained. In fact, I'd be surprised if Maz Kanata wasn't, even though they didn't make her Force sensitive. I wouldn't be surprised if she could be.
Well, but aptitude I think you actually kind of hit it there by accident when you said talent. Because there's a difference between skill and talent. Talent is inherent ability, something that we're just naturally able to figure out or naturally able to do without any practice, whereas skill is something that you develop.
I experience that all the time as a music teacher, by the way.
I'm betting you do, where some people are just plain talented with an instrument and other people are skilled with it or need to develop their skill. Or somebody's talent gets them so far, and then suddenly they need to start actually practicing.
or they reach the wall and then give up.
Yep.
Yeah.
And then they just sort of justify it as, well, I just didn't care about it that much.
Suddenly your talent wasn't enough and you didn't want to work.
Exactly. I see that all the time, and I like to view midichlorians in that light. I guess we're at, unless there's any other points on anything else we've talked about, we're at, was it good? Anything else?
We needed more Chewie in the bowcaster. It needed more bowcaster.
I like this thing.
You've been working with this Wookiee for 30 years and you've never tried out his weapon.
I think Gina and I talked about that, and she suggested that maybe this was an upgrade, and that he had seen the previous one and even had used it, but this was like an upgraded version that like made explosions and things. So he's like, ooh, I like this upgrade.
I mean, that helps it make more sense, yeah. But there was not enough bowcaster in this film.
I liked the whole Chewie, speaking of Chewie, eating the roast porg, and the one porg like looking at him, he's like, you are ruining my meal, sir.
Yeah. Eventually he's just like, I can't. Now it's the moment's gone. I can't.
Yeah.
You can see the damn it. I was going to enjoy that on his face.
Just the Force looking like, why are you eating us, Chewie? Why you do this?
That was my mom.
It will be the question of whether or not he was going to eat it.
It is left unclear whether or not he eventually ate it.
I think he wanted to, and I think he was waiting till they weren't watching, so he probably went inside and ate it.
But then they were all inside.
They had a nest in there too.
Yeah.
I think it wasn't a super clear transition, but I think it was because of the rain. Like, they were all standing around in the rain. I think he, like, brought 2 in out of the rain, and it just exploded on him. And at the end, he was like, I regret my original decision to bring them in.
I can't have
It's
all
too
these
late
sports.
now.
So now we move on to our final point in this hour and a half spoiler cast. Was it good?
Yes.
I'd say it's good.
I would say it was good. I would say that it was sloppy in places. I would say that the story, just like we compared to The Force Awakens, was so heavily involved on the characters themselves that the overall story was lacking. But I say that doesn't outweigh all the good things. It's a treat to watch. The character development puts you on the edge of your seat when Rey and Kylo are constantly being connected through their Force Skype or all the other things like the fight scene in the throne room or Luke and Kylo's face off and things like
Did
that.
you put on a towel or something? No.
I love watching emo Kylo Ren on Twitter. He walks around in dark rooms with oil on his chest in case someone calls him.
Wow.
I love emo Kylo Ren.
I think I'm summing up what we've all said here, which is the bad does not outweigh the good, and the bad is simply a little bit of sloppiness on the plot itself and the continuity, and that's fine. Movies have that.
There was a big focus on lessons in this one that hasn't been present in previous Star Wars films. What I've noticed in previous Star Wars films was that the focus was always on the spectacle or the clash between good and evil, and they were kind of one-dimensional in that way. Whereas this one's focus was on the lessons, which was, this is not a time for heroes. Failure is an important step towards success. There are people who are just in it for themselves and don't take sides.
I'm going to argue with you and change my stance a little bit. Because you just made a great point about what defines Star Wars. That the plot of good and evil is a backdrop to the struggle inside the characters.
Mm-hmm.
The difference, for example, between Star Wars and Star Trek, for example, we talk about this all the time on our podcast. Star Trek is always about the greater good, so it's all about the big picture and how you fit into it, whereas Star Wars is about how the individual is able to look inward for the answer to the problems outside. The scene in Empire where Luke goes into the cave and fights Darth Vader. Yeah, this Empire. Because he didn't get training in Jedi. He realizes that there's a Darth Vader inside of him.
I was sitting in the theater when Rey went down into the hole, and I was like, they're going to redo that scene where, like, she's going to fight Kylo with the mask on, and it's going to be her under the mask. And they're like, don't do that, don't do it. And they didn't do it. And I was really proud of them. I was really proud of them.
The Infinite Rays was such a cool idea, and I think the point there was that Rey's going to determine her destiny. There's no reason to build up her parents as a mystery.
I got a little bit more out of it, or maybe something a little bit different out of it, if you will.
Oh my gosh, I just remembered one final gripe. My gripe is you don't set up a question in one movie and then don't answer it in the next one. If you're not going to answer it, if you're going to say it's not important, then you set it up in that movie and then subvert it in the same movie. Yeah. And the two main things where they did that was Snoke and Rey's parents. Yeah. If you set it up for the next movie, then you're signaling to the fans who wait 2 years for the answer that there is an answer. Yeah. And then when you say, no, Snoke's just a Hugh Hefner dude who gets sliced in half. And then when you say Rey's parents don't matter, that could have been done in a shorter time frame.
Yeah. Well, I think they wanted to build up, Rey's parents are actually kind of why I got something a bit more out of that scene than just she's going to determine her own destiny. And it was a build-up across two scenes. When Luke first started teaching her to reach out with her mind and use the Force to feel the connection between things, she immediately found the darkness that existed beneath the island, and she went to investigate it in her mind. And Luke, pulled her out of it, and
I loved that scene.
He's staring at her with not even anger, terror in his eyes, saying, you didn't even try to stop yourself from going into that darkness.
I loved that scene so much.
It set up two things. One, it set up the idea that part of the reason Luke failed earlier in his life is because he still had fear. And as Yoda explained, fear leads to anger, anger leads to hate, hate leads to the dark side. So he was afraid of the darkness, whereas Rey, having a different upbringing, a different attunement to the Force perhaps, was able to look into that darkness and not be swayed, because she eventually went to that hole and dove down in, and that's where you had the infinite mirrors thing. This was that people are drawn to the dark side because they believe it has answers. They believe it has power. They believe it has whatever they need to make their life better. So they're drawn to the dark side to reach out and seize the thing that will give them that which they don't have, but that they believe they need. And so she went into the darkness hoping to find answers. She was willing to risk her soul to turn from the light into darkness to get what she wanted, just like every Force user before her that became Sith. And yet she went down into that darkness and realized there aren't answers here. The answers, like you said, are in ourself. And that it was only upon realizing that she was able to look into the darkness and then turn away.
They also illustrated this in the scene when Luke finally stated like what actually happened with Ben Solo when he was standing over top of him. He was afraid of the darkness, was ready to kill his pupil, and he was ashamed of himself for that.
That's actually the scene I was going to bring up, but I was going to bring up that he, because of his fear, was being driven to do a dark side action.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That fear was leading him to, if he had completed that action, he probably would have turned.
Yeah. And he was ashamed that he had allowed that darkness in himself, and he feared it. There's this powerful episode of the TV series, The Clone Wars, where Yoda is undergoing Force training. He ends up fighting a dark version of himself, and it's chiding him and goading him and telling him about all the things he fears. And the whole time he's like, no, I don't have any darkness in me. I'm pure. I have accepted the Force. I reject you. You are the darkness that represents my fear and hate, and I reject you. And he's fighting this battle of attrition against the thing, and it just seems to keep coming back stronger as he's weakening and weakening. And finally, he kind of has this moment of clarity. And as the thing comes in to attack him, this dark shadow of himself, rather than fighting it off with his lightsaber as he has been the whole time, he steps in and embraces it and pulls it into himself and says, no, I can't win this fight by simply rejecting you and trying to drive you off. You are my darkness. My darkness is a part of me, and it must exist in balance with the good in me.
All right, so I think we're in agreement here. The movie was good.
Yes.
I don't think it was perfect, but I think we all put it somewhere in our top list of some number.
Yeah.
I'm guessing, Tristan, you're going Empire than Last Jedi as far as your ranking?
I think that's fair, yeah.
Okay, what about you, Malachi? What's your ranking? How far do you go to get to Last Jedi?
I would say it's one of my top, but I definitely enjoyed it. It was worth watching.
Top 1, top 3, top 5?
Probably top 5.
If I have to be honest and actually do my ranking down to Last Jedi, it's got to be Empire, Hope, and then I think it's a tie between the two Jedi movies for me.
The Last Jedi and the Return of the Jedi.
I actually do like Return of the Jedi.
I like Return of the Jedi. I'm just,
I get that when it was the new movie, everyone hated on it, and I think it stood the test of time. I think it's a good movie.
Oh yeah.
I would say that they're on par with each other, and the same gripe people have with the other one that I also have with this one is a little bit too much fluff and not enough deep meaning in some of the plot. Yeah, there's too much fluff, not enough crunch, but there was enough crunch in both of them that made it really good. The crunch in Return was Luke and Vader. The crunch in Jedi is the Luke and Vader subplot as well, which is Rey and Kylo. So
yeah, there you go.
Yeah. So there we go. I guess that's it for our spoiler cast.
Star Wars. If you haven't gone to see it, go see it.
Yeah, if you sat through an hour and a half of this spoiler cast and you haven't seen it, I don't know what your priorities are, because you had the time to watch half of it.
Hey, that sounds like it's eerily directed at someone we all know.
Oh, well, I hope Alex isn't listening to this without watching it.
I don't think he's going to.
Yeah, if you're listening to this and you've seen it, then let us know through social media, or if you're on YouTube, then just leave a comment what you think of it. But if you haven't seen it, then watch it and then let us know if our review shaped your understanding of the movie and maybe made you enjoy it more than you would have.
We have a Facebook page and a Twitter.
Yeah, you can look for Playerful Podcast. I enjoyed chatting with you guys. It was a good time.
I enjoyed Englishing with you guys.
Good night.
Good night, everybody.
Hashtag goodbye.
Okay, can you do a caboose?
Goodbye.
Hey, that was really good.
Get him to do caboose from now on just to piss off Alex.
Like when he said something right before Alex did his goodbye last time.
I think that's the trouble Alex has, is he has no chill when it comes to how things happen. He goes, this is how it has to happen, and if it doesn't happen this way, he blows up. Like, he can't just let it go. He can't just let it roll off, wait for the laughing to stop and do his thing. He's gotta, no, I was gonna do it, and then you messed me up, and now it's like,
That's-
Alex, do the thing.
That's why we love them.
You messed up during the intro. If Alex had been here, I'd be like, oh, good, we already messed up. We're so professional.
Well, now that you brought attention to it, I have to keep it.
Yeah, exactly. Uh-oh. No. Don't do that. You know what's a funny story? My mother didn't know that the episode 4 of Star Wars was called A New Hope. I was talking to her about Star Wars the day after I saw the film because she wanted to know things. She's kind of a Star Wars person, but not as much as we are. And so I was like, yeah, so because she wanted to compare it to the first 3 episodes. I'm like, no. Not 1, 2, and 3, 4, 5, and 6. And she's like, wait, what were those called? And I'm like, well, because 7 was too much like A New Hope. And she goes, well, wait, no, it was too much like episode, what was it, 4? I'm like, yeah, A New Hope. She goes, wait, episode 4 was called A New Hope? I'm like, yes, episode 4, A New Hope. She goes, that's a stupid name. I never knew that.
I think that was tacked on after the theatrical release. It was simply referred to as Star Wars, though supposedly Lucas had intended to include Episode 4, A New Hope, in the opening crawl. 20th Century Fox didn't want him to do that because it would confuse audiences since there were no episodes 1 through 3. So it was added on after the fact.
I didn't know that.
Thanks to the following patrons for making this video possible. Support us at patreon.com/player4podcast.